Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you our analysis of the second FCS semifinal game of the weekend. The one that I believe will be the best game of the weekend, has a chance to be an instant classic. A battle of unbeatens between the James Madison Dukes and the Sam Houston State Bearkats. So guys, we are here today to break down everything you need to know about this game. How these two teams got to this point. We're going to break down the offense. We're going to break down the defense. At the end of it all, who's winning this game, advancing to the national championship to take on the winner of Delaware and South Dakota State. And you can find our projected winner for that game in our previous video. Make sure to go give that a look. But the two teams that win these two games will play in the national championship on May 16th. So let's take a look, guys. Let's talk about James Madison. Let's talk about Sam Houston State. What to expect from these squads on Saturday. We're going to start with the Dukes first. How did they get here? Well, first, they've been already, obviously, a top 4 team coming into the FCS playoffs. They have dominated the majority of their opponents all year long, and that was no exception last week in the quarterfinals where they took down North Dakota, the Fighting Hawks, 34-21, dominating them with 468 yards of offense, outgaining them by 124 yards. North Dakota is a dang good team, guys. Very balanced team. Tommy Schuster, Otis Weah. Many people thought they could be a trendy upset there. And Duke said, not so fast. We're looking to avenge that national championship loss that we had 2 years ago. And they can't do that if they lose too early. Sam Houston State. They pulled off an upset over North Dakota State. Despite being the home team, despite being the higher ranked team, the Bearkats were not favored to defeat the Bison. And many people were surprised that they did it. A lot of people said their defense wasn't up to par. They said their strength of schedule was too weak, that they couldn't do it. And they upset North Dakota State, one of the greatest dynasties in all of sports, beat them 24-20 with a game-winning touchdown with 3:39 remaining in the game. And it should be noted, guys, that while it was a very close game, the Bison didn't even have an offensive touchdown in the game. North Dakota State scored off of a kickoff return for a touchdown, a punt return for a touchdown, a field goal, and a safety. Basically every way possible but an offensive touchdown. They also only gave up 139 rushing yards and only gave up 90 passing yards to the Bison. So Sam Houston State turned in a very solid performance last week. It resulted in a big-time upset. They're now sitting in the semifinals, and North Dakota State's not around to claim another national championship. So the window is open for these 4 teams that remain in the playoffs. Let's take a look at the offenses, guys, between James Madison and Sam Houston State. And I want to say before we dive deep into it is that these are two teams that are very balanced, that are very dominant offensively. We've seen that all year long, but they clash in style. And I love that. I love when we see a clash in offensive style. James Madison, more run-centric, more run-heavy. Sam Houston State, if you watch them, you know they are very pass-heavy. That is their bread and butter. That's their strength. And we're going to start with the Dukes. We're going to start with James Madison and the run-heavy team. First thing I want to touch on, though, is the fact their offense is clicking at the right time. They've scored 31 points in their first FCS playoff game. They scored 34 points in their second playoff game, just last week, obviously, against North Dakota. That's huge. The fact that your offense is improving and clicking at the right time, finding that balance right now, that's huge. When you look at the numbers, they're averaging 33.4 points per game. They're averaging 246.6 rushing yards per game. That's the main number there that you're looking at there. Almost 250 rushing yards per game. And how are they doing it? Well, they're led by one of the best running backs in the country, Percy Ajayi Obase, 619 yards, 8 touchdowns on the year. They also have Juwan Hamilton, who's rushed for 481 yards and 5 touchdowns on the year. So you've got a, double threat, double trouble really in that backfield with Ajayi Obase and Hamilton, who are taking care of business left and right and have been doing so all year. The Dukes have rushed for more yards than they have passed in 4 of the 7 games they've played this year. So they have more rushing yards than passing yards in 4 of the 7 games they've played. And that's not to take away from the talent and the job that their quarterback, Cole Johnson, has done. Thrown for over 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns, but he has thrown 6 interceptions. And we talked about that last week in our preview of James Madison's game against North Dakota. It was, everybody knows the Dukes are going to run. That's what they want to do. That's what they're the best at. Johnson can do it, but if you're going to ask me, do I want Johnson leading my game-winning drive? No, I don't. I really don't. James Madison has not been put in a situation where they've had to do that. That could change on Saturday, and I do question if Johnson will be able to do that, especially if he'll be able to take care of the football, period. So the Dukes, a run-centric team, they've got that. They're going to try to do that as much as they can against Sam Houston State. The question is it going to pan out? If it's a close game, they start airing it out. Can Johnson pick up that slack? You look at Sam Houston State, the job that the Bearkats have done. They're 8-0 on the year, and we said that earlier. The passing game is the primary strength. If they could, they'd pass on every single down. They're averaging 39.3 points per game, 298.5 passing yards per game, and it all starts with their quarterback, Eric Schmid. Over 2,300 yards, 16 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions on the year. Last week against North Dakota State, had 227 yards and a touchdown. Also had the game-winning rushing touchdown, again, with just a little under 4 minutes remaining in the game. And you look at the talent that he has around him. The main player that he has to go along with him in this passing game is his wide receiver, Jaquez Ezzard. 646 yards, 6 touchdowns on the year. He's averaging 26.9 yards per reception. That's an unreal number. 26.9 yards per catch. Unreal. That connection, that chemistry between Schmid and Ezzard is why Sam Houston State has had one of the best offenses in the entire country. They also, we mentioned, are balanced. James Madison, very balanced. Sam Houston State is too. They're averaging 173.9 rushing yards per game to complement that passing attack. But the problem is, Sam Houston State only had 90 rushing yards last week. They only had 90 rushing yards last week against North Dakota State. A very stingy North Dakota State defense. We knew it was going to be a battle. The problem is, Sam Houston State might be rushing for less than 90 this Saturday against James Madison, because the Dukes have one of, if not the best defense in the entire country. They're allowing just 68 rushing yards per game. They're allowing just 68 rushing yards per game. That is unreal. But if you're looking for some sort of silver lining, if you're Sam Houston State, listen to this number. In the 2 playoff games so far for James Madison, the Dukes have allowed 248 rushing yards, which isn't bad. Just 124 rushing yards per game. But that number is more. 248 in these 2 games is more than they allowed in 5 games combined. James Madison played 5 regular season games, but in 2 playoff games, they have allowed more rushing yards in those 2 games than they did in all 5 games combined. That's crazy. That's a ridiculous number, guys. A ridiculous stat. Shows how good this defense is, but maybe they're getting a little weaker. Maybe they're, loosening up a little bit. Maybe the door is open for Sam Houston State to remain balanced and maybe to take a little edge off for Eric Schmid with Ramon Jefferson. Obviously, that's not going to be what they want to do, but if they have to, they will. The door is open. James Madison has to fix that. When you look at the Dukes' defense outside of that, they're allowing 164.3 passing yards per game. To me, that's the main focus for any team playing Sam Houston State. Yes, we're a little lightly worried about the run. You can't just completely ignore it. But if you can't stop the pass, it doesn't even matter. They've got to find a way to stop Eric Schmid. It is possible. He was slowed down a little bit against Monmouth. He was slowed down a little bit against North Dakota State. It's possible. It's just how much can you slow him down? Because, again, slowing them down is one thing. Stopping them completely is completely different. Look at Sam Houston State, guys. They got so much hate last week. Nobody thought that Sam Houston State could stop North Dakota State's ground game. They said the Bearkats' numbers were skewed because they had a weak strength of schedule. They hadn't played anybody. They hadn't seen anyone as big and physical and as good as North Dakota State. The Bison were going to go down to Texas and run all over them. And Sam Houston State said, no, they're not. No, they are not. Again, they held North Dakota State at just 229 total yards, 90 passing yards only, and they forced 3 turnovers. The only thing that went wrong for Sam Houston State was they had a minor relapse on the special teams. Again, allowing that kickoff return for a touchdown, allowing the punt for a touchdown, again, allowing the blocked punt that resulted in a safety. All of that combined resulted in 17 points for North Dakota State. You take away 1 or 2 of those or all of those, and it's an absolute domination blowout for the Bearkats. Put that into perspective a little bit. The defense showed that they can do it. They also showed they can stop the run, and we know how key that's going to be for Sam Houston State in this game, considering that James Madison's averaging almost 250 rushing yards per game. The Bearkats are allowing just 73.6 rushing yards per game. Those numbers are not skewed. I don't care who they've played. That's legit. This defense is good. They are legitimate. 73.6 rushing yards per game. They are allowing 278.4 passing yards per game. But like we said last week with North Dakota State, we picked Sam Houston State to upset the Bison. And I said, look, I don't have faith in Zeb Nolan or Cam Miller to go out there and exploit a weak Bearcat secondary. I just don't see it happening. And obviously, we were right. North Dakota State only had 90 passing yards. I don't believe that Cole Johnson can go out there for James Madison. I don't believe he can go out there and light up a relatively weak and not very impressive Sam Houston State secondary. So Sam Houston State has gotten lucky in facing quarterbacks that really haven't been all that impressive. They've gotten lucky in facing teams that have been very run-centric. That's been their strength. Sam Houston State's been able to focus on that and said, all right, fine, come at us. We're okay giving up some big chunk plays through the air every now and then. But we know we're not facing a team like us. We know we're not facing a team that airs it out like we do. And I don't believe Cole Johnson can do that. So that's kind of Sam Houston State, in a way, is getting North Dakota State 2.0, a team in James Madison that plays very similar ball to the Bison, maybe a little bit better than North Dakota State, but in terms of style and how they run their team, very, very similar to North Dakota State, who, again, Sam Houston State defeated last week in a thriller, 24-20. So who do we have winning this game, guys? Who do we have winning this game on Saturday afternoon? Again, a game that I believe is going to be an instant classic, a game that I believe is going to be the best semifinal matchup of the day. No offense to Delaware and South Dakota State. That should be great in and of itself. But this one is one I think most people's eyes will be on. It's very tough. The tough pick. James Madison, believe it or not, is slightly favored by 1 point. As of this filming, they are a 1 point favorite on the road against Sam Houston State. Shows how tough it is for everybody. I could very well see it being a pick-em, even line, when the game kicks off a little after 1 p.m. Central Time. When I look at this, though, guys, you look at the on paper, Sam Houston State, to me, they own that passing edge. They certainly own the quarterback edge. James Madison, though, they clearly own the running back edge. They might own the edge in the trenches. They maybe very well could own the defensive edge. I will say that. But you know what? I've got a slight hunch. And I believe that Sam Houston State is going to pull off another upset over a perennial FCS power. They're going to continue their Cinderella run. They're going to remain undefeated. And I do have Sam Houston State defeating James Madison on Saturday afternoon. Last week, they showed they could play with the big boys. Last week, they showed that their strength of schedule and everything, their undefeated record wasn't a fluke. Last week, they showed that. They're going to show it again on Saturday. They're going to beat James Madison in a thriller. They're going to beat the two teams that met in the last FCS National Championship. They're going to beat them in consecutive weeks. And in doing so, the Bearkats will punch their ticket to the FCS National Championship. I believe they have what it takes to slow down James Madison's running backs. If Cole Johnson is forced to go out there, win the game through the air, to lead a game-winning drive, or to take over because the run game is non-existent, I do not believe he's going to be able to do that. Sam Houston State's defense flexes their muscles once again. Eric Schmid in this passing game cannot be stopped, and the Bearkats will advance to the national championship to take on the winner of Delaware and South Dakota State. And again, you can get our projected winner for that. So our projected national championship matchup, find out in the previous video who we have winning that game between the Blue Hens and the Jackrabbits. The result very well could surprise you. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Sam Houston State punching their ticket to the national championship. Find out the results on Saturday. I promise these are games you do not want to miss. You also do not want to miss everything down in our description below. Exclusive content to get you through this college football offseason. Check it out. Our podcast, our website, our merch. Everything is down there for you, so give it a look. And as always, please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.